Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Yeah, guys. Just thought I'd say hello. I'm Jack, obviously. Fucking thanks for listening to the show and that, mate. Fucking let me know what you think of it when you're done with it. Fucking send it to a mate. Put it on your Instagram stories. It's probably one of the better ways you can share it with people. Leave a review, mate, if you're listening somewhere where you can leave a review. Otherwise, I'll let you get on with the show, mate. Yeah. Nice one, Jen. You alright, guys? I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM, and I thought it'd be nice for one of them that I wish I had a better name for, a movie madness episode. Everything isn't what it seems. Acting peculiar, but it'd be written with a comma in between acting and peculiar, which only looks good written down. I'll take patent 6506148 to go, which isn't anywhere near as catchy. Reading Between the Limelight, but that kind of made it sound like it was about celebrities, and this is just about films, so that might be misleading to people. Either way, it's one of those where I've watched a kids' film and wrote loads of notes about it and looked into it for the brainwashing and predictive programming and the other hidden messages that may have been in there. I'll be dead honest, I don't think I watched much TV and films and that as a kid. I watched a lot of Looney Tunes, and because of that I used to go into the wooded areas and dig little holes to try and break people's ankles with what I call traps. I also used to enjoy turning staircases into unwitting obstacle courses with shin-height thread and clear sellotape, so probably just as well that I wasn't watching much else on the telly, really. I just think it's kind of obvious that all of that was happening because of the TV, and if it can happen to me, then, you know, can happen to you and all, or to your kids, which is obviously worse. And if you were lucky enough to have been getting your end away in the 90s, then maybe you have a kid that could have been affected by the films I've been choosing, like me. Not in the sense that I was getting my end away in the 90s, I would have been less than 10, so this isn't me coming out and saying, oh, you know, I got fiddled as a kid. This isn't like a tell-all episode or like an autobiographical thing for attention. Yeah, I mean, either way, let's get into it. So this week I'm cupping the spuds that are the brain of your child and coming out of the tap of the mouthpiece of the one world government, and that water coming out of that mouthpiece, boys and girls, is scented with the Alan Partridge cult classic Around the World in 80 Days. Let's have a song. This is Say That Then by Slaughterhouse. So, immediately, right, the film starts off with Earth and we're crashing through the clouds towards it. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that this film was made a few years after 9/11, so it's fair to assume that people were probably quite nervous at the time about aerial attacks, and the cameras zoom in all the way down to the City of London. And I don't think it's wrong to assume that people were probably expecting a terrorist attack in London in the early 2000s. And we did in fact have the 7/7 bombings in July, almost a year after the release of 2004 of this film. More specifically though, 363 days after the release of this film, and with a bit of what I believe to be considered numerology. But we can learn quite a lot from the numbers 363. If we separate the numbers into separate numbers, we get the numbers 3, 6 and 3. And then if we add them all together, we get 12. We separate them once again and we get 1 and 2 making 3, right? If we apply the same method and logic. Now, 3 holds some significance, but we do have some other numbers here. We have 80 from the name of the film, so that's an 8 and a 0. And if we add the 3 to the 8, that gets us 11. Now, normally we would separate the 1 and the 1 and add them together for 2. But because it's the number 11, that holds a certain significance, and we're going to leave that there because it's very important in the world of numerology. Also worth noting that before we got the number 3, by adding 1 and 2 together, we had the number 12, which is a number that seems to crop up in all of these films in some way or other. Now, immediately getting back into the movie now, getting back into Around the World in 80 Days, we see a copper straight away implying that quite possibly there is something from the skies above us which controls us. Could the central London location of control for the world's population be from within the moon? It may not pass through our clouds, especially if we're to believe, like fucking mainstream science. And even a lot of alternative science suggests that our moon doesn't pass through the clouds. But I'll be honest, I refuse to believe that there isn't someone out there that believes that the moon passes through the odd cumulonimbus in that here and there, After all, if the moon does truly control all the water on our planet, then it must also have a part in controlling rainfall. And what if we're not 60% water, right, aren't we? According to scientists, we're 60% water. That means we have potentially only 40% control left of our own bodies. We've already given 60% of our control away to the overlords in the moon. Now that's less than half, and I'm not ready to lose another percentage of control of my body. Are you? Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So we then start to see what looks like the love child of Jackie Chan and Alan Partridge come flying out the window of a building, and straight after this moon reference as well. And this could yet again be a way that films have managed to tie together the splicing of DNA and reference the moon, or at least the sky, in a children's film. And at this point, we're only 1 minute and 29 seconds into the film, and I find it shocking, mate. I think it's mental. So that there's been so much in this film already, so I'm expecting big things for it. And in hindsight, having gone through it, there are big things in this. Right, turns out the fella that looked like he was half Jackie Chan and half Alan Partridge was in fact just a full Jackie Chan. He was Jackie Chan. And if we were to continue with the same line of investigation of there's something in the sky that watches us and possibly controls us or controls the police, we've now just seen an interpretation of shape-shifting in this film, as Jackie Chan has now gotten changed and appears to be a new person entirely. And he's also jumped up and hidden in a tree, another way to suggest that these controlling entities are watching from above. We now seem to have evidence for what seems to be symbology, but very different to anything I've ever witnessed before in a kids' film. Alan Partridge seems to be playing the part of an inventor, but he seems to be coupled up with this little old man, making Alan seem huge in comparison, but the short bloke's wearing some form of headpiece that resembles some of the drawings from ancient Egypt, the ones that had people with elongated heads and that at the back, showing us, right, that there's the possibility that there could have been some form of giant creature that came to Earth and interfered with the abilities of humans, as Partridge says something along the lines of, "Today we break records, man shall exceed 50 miles per hour." Which gives credence to the ideas of aliens coming and interfering with human DNA. It also plants the seeds of evolution in children's heads, because the old man is a lot shorter than Alan Partridge, and we're obviously led to believe that as humans have progressed, we've all been getting bigger and bigger and bigger over time. It then shows the little bloke saying that he quits, and he's at a kind of eye height with Alan, even though he's a lot shorter. So he's actually standing on this little bridge over what looks like a tube, and it's like a little box they've got him to stood on to do it. And I was wondering if this is some sort of reference to the Garden of Eden story, where Adam and Eve got kicked out, except the tiny old man decided to leave instead of getting kicked out. So maybe they lied in the story about Adam and Eve, and that maybe they just left, but they didn't want us to know that we could just leave. So, Christians and that were a bit more like, whoa, fucking change this. They got kicked out, they didn't leave, they got kicked out. Like when people say, oh, I left, but really they got fired, except in reverse. Anyway, it's also worth noting that they are having this conversation in a walled off garden, and it seems to be taking place next to some form of weird, almost steampunk style advanced machinery. Alan claims the electrocution wasn't his fault, and that's because the little man's saying he got electrocuted by him. And that's something that seems to be associated with gods as well. Not just the power to control electricity, but also the idea of forgiveness and shifting the blame. Like last week in our episode last week, we learned that God flooded the earth. Enlil flooded the earth all because he was sick of humans. It's always someone else's fault when it comes to the gods. They never take responsibility. The Christian God sent his only son to earth to have him brutally tortured and killed, surrounded by criminals on a hill in the blistering sun, all because of the humans. And he blamed the humans for it. He said, this is why this happened. Now, this is the message that's being taught to your children overtly, right? So this is why it's important to look through the lines in films like this, look between the lines, because imagine all of the stuff that slipped through the net and fucking lodged into our heads growing up. Now, we see Jackie Chan appropriating culture.
pretending to be a Frenchman. Again, showing us that these creatures that watch us from above have the possibility to have the ability to shapeshift, but maybe only when no one is looking. Maybe that's what the whole debate around the observed electrons or the observed positrons, I forget which, is actually prepping this generation for. When you observe the time-travelling electrons, they act accordingly, they do what we think they should do, they look how we think they should look, but when you look away, they do whatever they want and go all over the show. Just like how when Jackie Chan was hiding in that wagon earlier on, that was clearly owned by a bloke called Taylor, he was able to change his outer appearance because no one could see him at the drop of a hat and come out the back end wearing a very well-fitted suit. Strangely, mentioning physics, the film then says, let's change the laws of physics, which is something that will happen when we finally understand the nature of positrons and antimatter, which seem to be heavily related to one another. We then get shown what could easily be a way to represent our solar system, but keeping with the so-called scientific beliefs of positrons and electrons, some scientists have believed that an electron travels through time, and that time itself is on some form of constant loop, which is what Jackie Chan is now on in the film. He's on a circular track, going round and round and round in a loop, gaining speed, just like a positron or an electron as it travels through the loop of time, mate. So, is Jackie Chan, is he supposed to be this film's representation of a shapeshifter, or are the shapeshifters are actually just the electrons? Then that whole philosophical idea of humans are just the universe's representation of itself, trying to experience itself, starts to hold true and starts to, hold water, doesn't it? It starts to make sense. Soon after that, we see another bit of symbology as well. A statue that says the Royal Academy on it, but the statue itself is what looks like a mash of iron around the globe, showing children that academia is a prison, a way of enslaving your child's mind, limiting the way that they think and see the world. But obviously it doesn't say that, it's just there in symbols. We then see all these old men were talking about how a bank got robbed and broken into, meaning that this bloke we're looking at has lost a lot of money, which I thought could be a way to have readied the people watching this, readied the parents watching this, for the English bank Northern Rock being closed, and from my understanding, how I understood it as a kid, being single-handedly responsible for the recession in England of 2008. But I haven't looked this up to make sure. I don't look stuff up for these sorts of episodes. I just watch what the film shows me and what the film says to me. That's and that's just what I've made a note of as I'm doing this. And obviously it's just from the news clips I can remember as a kid, and that, just watching video after video on the news of people queuing up outside of Northern Rock and that. But, they did, didn't they though? Everyone fucking clambered for all their money trying to get it back. It's lucky really that internet banking exists now, because if this was to happen again, it means that everyone can just withdraw all the money online, innit, and put it into a different bank that's safe to use, We wouldn't have to queue outside anymore, we don't have to worry about recessions and stuff. And that in itself is making me wonder is that the reason why we've currently got a shortage of, what are they called, fucking HGV drivers and general long-distance lorry drivers? Could it be to do with the recent rise in internet shopping over the past couple of years? Because surely that means they've needed more Securico drivers to transport the money from bank to bank as all this money's changing hands in order to accommodate all these sales. And with the obvious danger money involved in being in such a vulnerable position, carrying around boxes of cash from banks to banks, all of our country's van and lorry drivers have gone to work for them instead, surely, and that's why we haven't got any. Shorter routes and more money in it, so it's a fucking win-win really for all of our nation's drivers, mate. And they're trying to con you if you're a driver, thinking, nah, come and be a fucking HGV driver, mate, come and do that. You've got to put your foot down, mate, fucking pedal to the metal and be like, no, mate, no, I'm going to go and work for a fucking company like Securico or something, where I get paid more money. I might get hit with an iron bar every now and then, but I'm insured for that, and I'll get a payout, mate. Like being a bus driver. I bet a bus driver gets a good payout if something happens to him, whereas a lorry driver, the only real thing that could happen as a lorry driver is, you could get molested in a fucking services, I guess. But you die in a crash, and that's, no one wants that. No one's going to risk that. What's good from that? Nothing. Anyway, I do have another theory though, another little theory, and I know we're getting away from the film at this point, and it's to do with It's to do with a bit of brainwashing that is in films and predictive programming and all. So it's that Thanos snap in the Marvel films. So Thanos snapped his fingers in it and half the people disappeared. Now, we've got a virus in it and loads of people died, but what if the virus that wipes people out is just a modern way to explain some form of event that we don't quite understand or can't explain? In this modern time now, in the past couple hundred years, we describe it as a virus, but hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, they may have described it as... like the gods came and wiped people away, or the Great Flood, or some form of cataclysm. Maybe something just happens every now and again that takes people away, destroys them, or disintegrates them, or sucks them up like a rapture, like an alien would go like that and fucking suck someone up a tractor beam. Although I imagine it'd be much more graceful and probably more like rather than. But sounds better, doesn't it? Than or shape-shifting entities, right, that are actually just the outward appearance for time-travelling electrons, at least, from our perspective, because of the perception filters put all around us by the grey aliens that we discussed a few weeks ago, right, and that's just... It's removing the shapeshifters rather than the people from existence, and it's changing how they look to us. So maybe soon we'll start seeing loads more pigeons because the shapeshifting electrons, the vampiric entities, the ethereal beings can no longer portray themselves as humans. So maybe they'll come back as robots or fucking drones or birds or fucking sea lions, mate, fish. I don't know. It's hard to tell, innit? We're trying to predict the future. It just seems odd to me that a lot of people in certain roles, in very specific roles, seem to have died or disappeared all at once, and that there's then a drive for them on the news. But that's got fuck all to do with the film. We have gotten lost. So let's have a song and then we'll carry on. This is Tech 9 with Life Sentences. The film starts setting up something about a jade Buddha, and something that sounds distinctly either Middle Eastern or Far Eastern, and I think they've now mentioned China a few times and all at this point, but they're also talking about land disputes from China spilling over to England, which seems strange because they're nowhere near each other, and it's also something that a lot of people seem to be worried about in modern times right now, nearly 20 years after this film, almost as if it was predicted in this film, and they set the film in the 1800s or whatever it is, the early 1900s, to try and make us think, oh, this is ages ago, but realistically the film was made like 19, 17, 18, 20 years ago, 2004, whatever the difference there is, 17 years, innit, off the top of my head. I haven't actually wrote that down anywhere. But yeah, so 17 years ago, they must have been aware that China must have been going to make moves on buying land and that in different countries, or people, at least, or they knew that they were going to make people worried about it. I mean, there's no aliens or anything there, but there's a lot of stuff about the Chinese literally buying up land in countries all over this hollow earth, It's everywhere, mate, if you go looking for it. Now, one of these important people seems to be called Lord Kelvin in the film, which I think is an old measurement of heat. I think a Kelvin is a measurement of heat, and I think that's just a way of trying to make the parents watching the film with the kid feel old and out of touch, making them consider changes in measurements and measurement systems over the previous SARS. And for those of you that aren't as keen-eared and haven't been taking notes through my episodes, which I do believe you should be doing, but I may release all of these as a book, so I'm not too sure yet, I haven't decided. But a SAR, if you remember, was like a reign, so it was like 3,600 years was a SAR, the equivalent of, which is also supposedly the orbit it takes for the planet Nibiru. Little bonus little fact there for you. Anyway, back to the film. We then see a threat that includes a writing quill that gets stabbed into the pineal gland of a portrait, and then also a knife, I think it was, in the penis of the portrait. So a threat which comes from a female Chinese general. So could this be to show children, right, that the East may attack? Be scared, be worried, be afraid, But they'll do so through your imaginations and libido. Right? The way the camera pans makes it seem like they're going to attack our minds first because it's a writing quill, which is a feather that they use to draw and write with and that scribble with and doodle with. And that's in the brain, like bang in the middle of the brain in the front of the forehead. So stories will be fabricated to upset people, and then they'll use that fear in order to be able to castrate people, either physically or metaphorically with fucking real knives. And this may have actually something to do with the lady being Chinese, or it might not, I'm not too sure, but because she is a woman, though, we can suggest that the drip feeding going on in this film here could be a way of showing that women all around the world, as far away as China, are mobilising to attack men's minds and penises through feathers and letter openers. We'll have to wait and see, though, innit? But it does appear that women seem to have become more focal in politics and influential over the years since this film was made. So it might have just been a way to show, oh, look, a woman can be a general. It might just be something as simple as that, just to make people think, oh, yeah, because I saw a woman as a general in that film once with all those actors that are new in it. Anyway, next, they display a wind-powered house, but at the same time, whilst discussing all of this, Jackie Chan keeps looking out of the window and sees the police inspecting people's identification forms out of the window, all whilst Jackie Chan's having a load of new rules imposed on him by Alan Partridge's character, because he's now in illegally... Well, Jackie Chan is now in illegal employment, basically, because he's I think you could say he's illegally gained the job of a valet, and it's illegal not because he's from China. Before anyone starts, nothing like that, but because he's posing as a Frenchman, right? And it may seem a little bit political here for me, but could this film, right, have been trying to ready the English to be wary of people coming here from France who aren't actually French, but are just pretending to be French or pretending to have come from France? And it's something that, happens a lot, innit? The fucking Swedish, the Dutch, they could easily get away with being French. We would never know. We wouldn't have a clue, mate. And some may argue that in the film showing this, it's satire, but others, right? Others might say that this is all just subtle brainwashing that becomes an awful lot more evident when you start to watch films in 15-second bursts from start to finish and take notes on every little bit that you see. We then get a little bit more genetic engineering talk in the film when Jackie Chan's looking at a mass of cloth and pointing at it in the ceiling, and it's a load of cloth and sticks put together, and Alan tells him that it will soon be his crowning achievement. Jackie questions him as if to say, is it a giant moth? Your achievement's going to be a giant moth. Also, if you, just a little side note, guys, if you do want a t-shirt or a poster with a giant Mothman on it, with a giant Mothman penis, or without a giant Mothman penis, with or without the penis, both are available now. You should go to www.worldaroundyou.com and order yourself one. All different sizes and that available. It's about 25 quid, I think. Anyway, getting back into the film. In recent years as well, whistleblowing seems to have been jaded, if you like. It's been altered. So whistleblowing used to be quite a good thing. People would be whistleblowers. They were commended, like, oh, fucking well done, mate. You fucking exposed something there that was bad. But now it seems to be a dirty thing to do, and that gets shown here in this scene as well, because the lights in the room, all the light bulbs are whistle activated, but Jackie whistles and the lights go out, and then Alan proposes a new rule about whistling, which seems suspicious, doesn't it? We then see the Jade Buddha, but just beforehand we also see a set of vampire teeth, and Jackie's saying that he's going to go back to China to make his village safe. But if we're to take it for granted that Jackie Chan's character is the representation of the ethereal shape-shifting entities, and we take into account the teachings of Ike, then it's possible that the vampire teeth we're shown here are a subtle way of telling us that these ethereal entities do in fact eat us as humans. But if they are in fact electrons or positrons or whatever, maybe they eat the electron that it was when it was younger if it manages to get back to it, but it has since learned, because it's become more advanced, it's learnt more, it's adapted, it doesn't need that old one knocking about anymore, it just wants the better versions of it hanging around in the ether, It needs to get rid of certain playthroughs, if you like, of its never-ending existence. We then see Alan start to take off his down the fucking road, speeding away on these little shoes with fucking wheels on the back of them. And since 2004, I would say that Heelys have become a thing. They've stuck around. Not long after this film, they started to be a thing, at least in England and that. And it's something that Heelys are something that are still irritating to this day while I'm recording this. And the scientists of the film, right, are scientists that we might be able to get behind here at Threshold FM, because they start to knock Alan Partridge's character for his beliefs in dinosaurs and evolution, and that they're things that have been questioned time and time again on this very station, guys. We then see how there is true information being passed around the room in regards to there being an Asian person robbing the bank, meaning Jackie Chan. And then the Chinese man in the film, Jackie Chan, witnesses this because he's in there and starts to spread misinformation. Now, could this be a way to teach us that there could be a people who may be Chinese whispering in the ear of our scientists and leading thinkers? Now, if you think about it, right, Chinese are often associated with communism, and the Russians as well are also associated with communism as well. And a lot of people seem to believe that universities are orchestrated by the Russians in order to teach young people, or to at least indoctrinate young people into more socialist beliefs. Except in this scene, it's the Chinese bloke telling the important people that it was actually the Norwegians that did the crime. So it may be subtly suggesting, or maybe trying to make people believe, just in the back of their minds, that the Chinese are responsible for any form of or distrust of or unrest, in Europe. Then we start to see how the Chinese manipulate the person who thinks that they're an independent thinker as well. And now when I am saying Chinese, I'm not saying that as me going, the Chinese. It's the Chinese in this film, which are actually, I believe, to be a representation of the ethereal entities that seem to surround us and feed off of us. So the ethereal entities, aka in the film, the Chinese, are trying to manipulate the independent thinker, who is Alan Partridge, his character, the maverick in the country, and they manipulate him into undertaking a task, right, that would then go on to undermine the traditions of the country he's from. Now, up to now, it seems like a very anti-China film if you look at it that way. But if you was to look at it as if to say China represents the ethereal, shape-shifting vampiric entities that exist all around us from the fifth dimension, it all starts to make sense, like it's trying to teach you that they're there. And then it goes to further show, right, that this maverick wants the position of head of the Royal Academy of Science. And this is all because of the Chinese, represented by Jackie Chan. Right at the end of this scene, right, we then get another weird reference that seems to be included in all of these films. Go on. No? The number 12, guys. Alan's character claims that at the strike of noon, which is 12, he will travel around the world in 80 days, which is weird how it fucking keeps creeping into everything that we talk about on this show. We then see Jackie Chan and the main character sitting in a bath together, almost as if to suggest, right, that China is in bed with the alternative science or the technological advancements of England, which I guess in a way it sort of is, because it's kind of responsible for at least making most of them, or producing, manufacturing them. Anyway, Jackie Chan then tries to use Alan's family against him, which is kind of like trying to make him miserable, use his misery against him like an ethereal entity would. But Alan's character's got no family. And I wondered if this was a way to try and make us aware of all the atrocities that have been happening to children in care that we found out about in the recent years that have passed us, all the bad stuff that have happened to kids with no family and no parents and that. And it's a way to show as well that the ethereal entities could be somehow tied to all the bad things that happens to orphans. So if you're an orphan that's listening to this and you've been affected by an ethereal entity. Anyway, we then see how the police of the country are just carrying out the orders of the wealthy. And as the copper tells them that they can't use the vehicle, and this seems relevant, because it's a brand new vehicle. They didn't know this vehicle existed. The only people that knew this vehicle existed was like 3 people in a room that challenged this guy to a bet to travel around the world, and this would have made it a lot easier for him. Would have helped to make the world better and help the world change, which obviously the people in power don't want to happen in the film, And we can link this to something recently as well. We could potentially link this to the electric scooters that came out and how they were quickly made illegal because it went against what rich people seem to want. They seem to want to be able to rent them out rather than letting people buy their own. Anyway, we then get another visual representation of shapeshifters in the sky, right? So a carrier pigeon gets chucked out of a window, but as it passes over a cloud, you see a scorpion in its shadow. Carrier pigeons have nothing to do with scorpions, so it doesn't make any sense for the start, but not just that, they've never really made any sense to me, because you always see the people using them, right, in films and that. They always have some form of intricate network of people or associates or spies, which means that You must have to have a pigeon for each person you know, and that pigeon is actually the other person's. And then when you've sent that message to them, do they then have to send that pigeon back to you by post? Because if you just release it, it's not going to go back there. It's just going to keep coming back to you. So I've never understood how you do it. So, and also, you know, because it's obviously before the invention of telephones and that. Say you see a girl that you like, or, you know, we'll be inclusive, you see a lad that you like, and then fucking, you're like, oh, I fancy a bit on them, you know, won't mind to go on them. And you go up to them, you're like, excuse me, love, could I have your warbler? Which I think is a type of pigeon. You're like, could I have your, and they're like, oh, and then they give you the pigeon. But then if they don't give you the pigeon, do you know what I mean? Or you could give them your pigeon and be like, yeah, I'll take my pigeon. Take me roller, yeah, I'll have me pigeon. And then they take your pigeon because, you know, they want to be polite and that, as people do. And then it's disheartening in a few ways then, isn't it? Because you've lost a pigeon that you were potentially close to if they never get back in touch. And they never got in touch, so you never got your end away. So, it just seems, carrier pigeons just seems like a fucking bad business. Anyway, back in the film though, we then see that the Chinese are all around Paris, and they're just hidden in plain sight, right? And in the film's story, they're there in the reason to be able to kill Jackie Chan. But they could be there to symbolise something much, much deeper. Jackie claims that Thomas Edison is there in Paris, which is an American man that helped to invent traffic lights, right? But we know that throughout history that the French and America were heavily intertwined because of some of the architecture that you can see in America and also obviously the Statue of Liberty. But if France is full of the Chinese, then that means they must also be in America too, doesn't it? Meaning, now if the Chinese represent the ethereal entities, that means that the ethereal entities must have some form of power or control in France and in America. Let's have a song. This is My Lady's Got Two Men by Atmosphere.
Some of you obviously don't know because I can see how many people listen to the show, so I thought I'd let you know about my other show. I've got another podcast now called Troof Seeking. It's me and a comedian called Jimmy Budd, and we talk about different conspiracies. If you imagine this, except there's another person kind of reining me in and keeping me kind of on track. And also cracking jokes as well. It's funny, mate. Like Jimmy makes me laugh, I make Jimmy laugh, and hopefully it will make you laugh and all. So that's Troof Seeking. You'll probably be able to find it through one of the links underneath. Please give it a listen and go and give Jimmy a follow on Instagram and let him know what you think of the shows. I'll let you crack on with this though for now.
Getting back into the film, we then start to get told that what the scientist, Phineas Fogg, that's Alan Partridge's character's name, he's looking and he's observing an infusion of reality and imagination all around him, which links back to how the Chinese man, this particular Chinese man is played by Jackie Chan, and he's managed to infuse reality and imagination as well in what's known as a lie in order to coax Alan's character away from the more dangerous Chinese people that are hunting the Englishman through the streets of Paris. We see a lot of fighting as well amongst the Chinese, and we see that there is an art exhibition going on at the time as well. And everyone that's there seems to be aware of the art exhibition, right? But behind literal closed doors, the Chinese are having a scrap amongst themselves. And I'm thinking, this could be to ready people for the existence of what we touched on the other week with the episode about the world stage. The idea that what we're shown is like a puppet show, but we aren't even aware of the puppet master, similar to what Plato suggested, but it was a lot less elegantly worded, and I managed to stretch it over nearly an hour. Now this belief though is then cemented because there are now three characters, as we've managed to pick up a French girl along the way with Jackie Chan and Alan Partridge. They exit the literal scene, but through a painting that's an optical illusion of a corridor against the wall, but it's in fact a secret door that leads them away, just like the door at the Truman Show and what I think happens at football stadiums and large music events. I think they have these mass gatherings, right, so that nobody notices people coming and going, because, you know, if someone's watching, an observer's going, oh, they're obviously going to watch the footy, or they're going to go and have a sing-song and go down to the concert and with their mates and that, you know, have a couple of beers and ogle the girl band on stage. Or, you know, they're walking through that car park when there's loads of cars. They've obviously left early so that they missed the traffic and can get out the car park easy. Or, you know, it makes sense, doesn't it? But think about it, mate. Think about how easy it is to blend into a crowd there, right? Think about all the doors at these venues as well that you never get to see open and that you can never open. You can never go into these rooms, right? And how do we know that these doorways don't lead to staircases or lifts? Because, modern times, modern solutions and all this. How do we know they don't lead to some method of going underground, mate? And it grants them access to the so-called, I don't know what you'd call it, the underworld, the literal underworld, not the hollow earth, but something underneath, like tunnel systems and that, How do we know it doesn't let them out of the known world, the world as we know it? We don't, that's the point I'm making, we don't know that. There's no way to prove it either, because nowadays as well, if you was to ask to have a tour of a football stadium or a fucking venue, a massive venue, big building, right, and you said, I want to see inside every door, I want to look behind every door, look in every cupboard, and I want to film it all, I want video documentation of it so I can prove what it all is and what it looks like and remember what it all looks like, and I want to see all of the space underneath the building as well and all of the structures underneath the building, they'd fucking accuse you of plotting terrorism, mate. And maybe that's why they invented the war on terror. Let's have a song. This is Space by Obi Trice, lyric and exhibit.
Right, mate, just a quick little advert for myself. If you're enjoying this, fucking join the Patreon, mate, if you can. For a little as a quid, 2 quid, 3 quid, tenner, whatever you want to throw on there, you get the same stuff either way. Obviously, it's nicer if you put like 3 quid on rather than a quid, because I'll only get like 75p out the quid, but still it's 75p more than what I'm getting now. It's just you get access to video versions of these, discounts for canvases and maybe some other little bits off my website, and you get access to the PDF versions, that's the digital download versions of my books. Anyway, I'll let you get back onto your show.
We then see them emerge from underground, which ties in with what I was just saying, and it does show that there are in fact a network of tunnels in use around the world, linking some places to other places that are accessed at public events. We then see a cameo from Richard Branson as well in association with a hot air balloon. He takes a big handful of money in order to allow unqualified and untrained people man an aerial vehicle, which seems dodgy, and I don't think there's anything about that in the real world so far, but we've still got time, we've got all of existence yet. Because obviously he's rich, so he should last for a while. And anyway, this is worrying though, if this does have something to do with our future, and or especially your children's future. If someone could go and take over a hot air balloon or a plane or a helicopter or a flying car, like we discussed in Troof Seeking a good few months back. Do you know what I mean? It could mean that someone could do that and hurt you by messing about in the air. Again though, there's something in the air. Something's in the sky. Something in the sky is paying money to be in the sky as well, you could take away from that. Now, I don't know what that something is. It could be our overlords, could be anything, could be the people in the moon or the creatures in the moon, could just be something sitting on some floating thing in the sky like the fucking Pridwin in fucking Fallout 4, mate. But we then see an elderly woman try to steal a load of money from Alan, and she starts biting JC on the shoulder, a possible nod to the scene before with the vampire teeth as well. The woman's also dressed a lot like a vampire in all black and kind of out of time and out of place, so if we do connect all of the dots here, we can see that there is a system of tunnels available to people and to things, now used in the film by shape-shifting entities, that has some form of connection somewhere along the line to vampires. Meaning that they could be trying to siphon off of our life force. But what if the very tunnels, right, are in fact our sewer systems? And the reason why they dwell in the sewer systems is because they use our excrement for sustenance. And that's why she bites him, mate. Because he's bound to stink of shit if he's fresh from the French sewers. Especially the French sewers, because they drink a lot. They smoke a lot, and I'm pretty sure they drink a load of coffee and all of that's going to affect the way that a person poos. So why else would she bite him except to show that the vampiric entities controlling or hiding out on Earth have some form of fascination with our bathroom deposits? We then see all of the Chinese characters in the scene as well, including JC, jump over this wall, which could be some form of way to represent the ice wall believed by flat earthers, or the limitations of borders put around the earth by gods, or if you're a Scientologist possibly, but the machines that are put floating around by Xenu. And we then get this other inclination of what's happening as well, because the vampire lady jumps over the wall, and on the way down she falls, and it sounds like she breaks her neck and dies, showing that maybe the vampiric entities are somehow trapped here on Earth by these so-called physical or metaphorical walls that have been put in place, which could be why they created the sewers, so that they've got more space to hang around in, or just so they could survive. Now, if sewers were actually an alien invention, as were most human advancements in infrastructure, then could it be that they were implemented just to make the imprisoned species of guests more comfortable on the surface? I'm not sure, innit, but I thought it was a possibility. And we then get an indication that JC may be a representation of a good-willed positron, if such a thing is possible. Or electron. Can't fucking remember which is which. But he saves a bunch of prostitutes and a mother and child from a potential house fire. And we then get a little bit of brainwashing, just a drop of brainwashing. We're shown that women can get things in the world that men can't, right? Alan Partridge's character goes and asks the train shovelers to make the train go faster, but he gets marched back to his seat. But then the woman goes and asks, and the train starts fucking flying down the tracks, mate. And she manages to get the three of them a first-class upgrade as well, potentially showing young women that they could feel a sense of entitlement, or perhaps that they're more important than their male counterparts. Or is it seedier? It could be much seedier. It seems to me like there's a little bit of sexual innuendo there with the train noise as it happens, so was it a way to teach young women that they'll soon be able to perform sexual acts in return for what they desire? And maybe this bit was sponsored by taxi drivers or something, you know, taxi drivers could be going around preying on young women, being like, oh, she looks like she's got no money, but I'll give her a lift and then I'll get a nosh for me services. But I mean, that's purely just me considering that, right? But then it does start to hammer it home a little bit more, because the lady's got lacy stockings on and Alan Partridge is staring at them, and then she notices it, and then they've got a bit of slapstick to emphasise that your prepubescent daughter will be able to use her sexuality to her advantage in her future. And we may be getting shown important locations around the world, I've noticed as well in this film, because they could pick from well over 100 countries between England and China, but so far they've shown England, France and now Turkey. Now I'm unsure of the relevance, but I'm hoping it might become clearer later on. And we may be getting shown countries of certain cultural significance, because in the film England was regarded as the hub of the future, France seemed very artsy and modern, whereas Turkey seems to have a leader played by Arnie, probably made most famous by his film, you know, The Kindergarten Cop, and I'm not going to say his last name because last time I did, I got removed off of TikTok for an hour for hate speech, so we'll be avoiding that. Either way, though, he also seems to be collecting relics, a lot like the Chinese war lady from the beginning with the throwing feathers. And Arnie says that he invented a way to irrigate his land so that he could feed all of his people. Now, it might be a stretch, but he's got statues of himself all over the place, like you have statues of gods in olden times, right? So is this the first link to the ancient American god Quetzalcoatl, or the generalised gift of agriculture from the gods to their people? Just as a little thought, he's usually there, and he seems to be just a little nod to him there. And Arnie being someone that came to America, like Quetzalcoatl came to America kind of thing, you know, from the sky. We then get this other little hint that Arnie is there to represent some form of god, because he references there being 7 days in a week, and that the woman who we're now just learning the name of, which is Mrs. Orange, she'll be his 7th wife. Now, you could argue that it's now trying to teach children that it's perfectly acceptable for a woman to use their sexuality to get what they want, but if men start to get sexual to get what they want, then that's not at all acceptable. Possibly making young heirs to kingdoms the world over who were watching this film think twice about how they can approach women. It seems strange as well to me that it's okay for a woman to possibly give a nosh to a couple of train drivers. I mean, I did get quite hung up on that for a while. And at the same time as well, both train drivers, I'm guessing at the same time, you know, for efficiency and that. Because that endangers hundreds of people, and it seems to be happening over a bridge. And effectively, if something went wrong there, right, that could halt transport and land-based haulage companies all around the world and fuck everything up for a lot of people. But one prince stops a train safely at a station and feeds and waters these people and invites a French woman, a Chinese man and an Englishman, like an old-fashioned joke, into his house and tries to woo and propose to the woman, and that's suddenly unacceptable. And then that's what I'd wrote, and then I've then wrote a little note to myself going, never mind. A few seconds later, his army were there whipping out swords to usher the blokes away so Mrs. Orange could be added to what I think is called a harem. But getting back into my proper what I've put together, the man that seems to be like a god, Arnie. He did have statues of himself, as I say, which seems like a god, and they've broken a bit of that statue off and then used that as a part to restrain him, adding to my theory that the vampiric entities are trapped here, or that the positrons of the universe itself, and by their very design, have trapped themselves within this existence of whatever this is. We're also now being shown that the rich and influential English people have decided that Alan's character is a criminal and that he robbed the Bank of England instead of the Norwegians that they believed it was earlier on. And that's a nice way of drip feeding the idea into children's minds that they shouldn't trust what the officials say about people. It also shows kids that the police are the playthings of the rich and all. Next up, we're in India, and I think maybe the significance of the countries could be their significance in relation to empires, because I'm pretty sure Turkey had an empire known as the Ottoman Empire. There was the French Empire, which spanned North America and some of Africa, I presume, the English Empire, and I'm confident there was an Indian Empire as well. And if there wasn't, I'm pretty sure India's some form of superpower like China and Russia, because it's a fucking subcontinent, innit? Anyway, let's have a song before we get into India, though. This is Take Me Home by Brother Ali. Just a minute, guys. I just wanted a little calm advert for you, a little calmer advert. And if you're like me, a pseudo-intellectual, what you might enjoy are my books. You've got Uneducated Guesses, where I found a load of big words I don't know the meaning to, and then tried to work out what they mean by breaking down the syllables and drew an illustration for each one. You've got How to Date an Antique Table, A Lover's Guide, which is a book that will tell you how to get your end away with an antique table, complete with how to find an antique table, where to take an antique table on a date, like you could take it dogging, you could take it to the cinema, you could take it for a picnic, and some chat-up lines as well, like, I know I'm drunk, but you look absolutely canted. And even then you got some pictures in the back of some of my taxidermy and that as well. And you've got my third book, More You Know, which is a book of very well-researched fake facts. Just a book of lies, basically. And some of them were suggested, as in topic-wise, were suggested by some of the people from TikTok. So you might, even if you took part in that, you might even have your username on the first couple pages of that book. Anyway, if you, like I say, if you're enjoying these, you might like the books. And you can get access to the books through Patreon or through my website. Or fucking let you crack on with the show, guys. We get another trope that seems to be in the films I keep selecting at random as well, which is weird. And it manages to link the animals of the zodiac. So we've just heard JC in the film talking about a tiger, snake, monkey, and then a goat gets mentioned, and a frog gets mentioned as well. And I'm pretty sure they're all animals of the zodiac, which just seems odd that it keeps coming back up. And I think it's another link to the number 12 and all, which always manages to poke its head up in these kids' films. And it definitely seems to be about empires now, because they're in China, innit? And China's obviously an empire. And one thing I did notice here is maybe they were taking the piss or something in the film, but it just seemed odd. It seemed like it could have been something to do with the internet, to be fair, but it looked like the voices were being dubbed over in parts whilst they were in China, which was odd, really odd, because they're speaking English, but it's like the lips were moving wrong for the words, but it wasn't like it had been sped up or slowed down. It just looked like they were speaking a different language and it had been dubbed over. Also, the sound quality changed and made it sound like it had been dubbed. And it's just odd, it just threw me. But it did make me wonder if, when they make a film, did they use the footage from the film that's left over, or rearranged it to make different films for different markets? So, for example, for Turkish audiences, would the film have started in Turkey and then they travel around the world from Turkey and come back to Turkey, just as an example? Because there's no reason why you couldn't put the film together like that realistically. I think it would work as is it called a noir, when it goes round in a circle, when it goes round in a loop, like a positron stuck in a loop of time. And again, little nod to it there, possibly, you know. And the film, it does kind of play into that idea that it's being dubbed and it's being changed for different audiences now, because the film shifted and Jackie started telling his mother that Alan's his valet instead. And it's also worth saying that at this point they're in day 41 of their 80-day journey, meaning that if they were representing an electron or positron, they'd now be making their return backwards through time. Meaning, right, that there could actually be an inversion of some description, or that they're in some sort of loop and now they're on the underside of it, of the original journey through time that they had taken. So it's the same but reflected. So it does make sense that Alan is now Jackie's valet, as it's the same but different, and it's mental. Fucking mad, mate, how much quantum physics they've managed to ram into this kids' film. We then see that JC is working for some form of hooded character, a character with seemingly no face, which could be trying to show your kids that there is the unseen hand, or the big they, or trying to at least make them believe in the unseen hand. The next bit of brainwashing, though, that comes as a load of Chinese people that are drinking heavily, but the Englishman's drinking it as well, and then after he drinks, he wants to kill himself and shows that he doesn't like it, almost to try and possibly put English kids off of the idea of drinking. And this ties in nicely with all the campaigns to end the so-called binge drinking era of what was going on in the mid-2000s. It was all over the news constantly. It was just always fucking normally younger or overweight people chucking up in streets, right? And it seems like it was purposeful in this film to try and make kids go, we need to put them off the drink, stop them from drinking, Maybe because they knew they would, in 10 years, 15 years' time, they'd be legalising cannabis. Who knows? But, there's also another little bit here which seemed a bit odd. It seems to try to stigmatise the Chinese as heavy drinkers, which is a trope that's usually reserved for the English, the Irish, and occasionally also the Japanese. And then we see something bizarre, which I do think is another way of drip feeding information, and it's the idea of this perception filter by the greys, by the grey aliens that we discussed a few weeks ago. Partridge's character is now reading a telegraph from Chan to his father, except it's in perfect English as he's reading it, which seems really unusual, considering that Jackie and the character that's his dad, they've only spoken in Chinese to each other for the scenes that we've seen them in. So it seems odd that they would converse in written English, because obviously more people would be able to read that as well. So it doesn't seem like a safe way to send a discreet message. So it is like it's trying to teach us that there are perception filters put there by the grey aliens in order to help us understand reality. And again, it ties in with the idea of the quote before, that reality and imagination, you observe both. We're also being shown that crime's acceptable as well, as long as it's for honourable reasons, which that's a nice way to try and keep kids from keeping out of prison, if you know what I mean, keep them in nick. But you could look a lot deeper into this as well, because over recent years, a lot of young people seem to have been campaigning online about museums and that in it, and fucking galleries, rather than seeing them as a place you go to learn or get information from. They just seem to see them as a collection of stolen artefacts, and maybe quips in films like Around the World in 80 Days could be to blame for this idea. We're seeing in this film that the English people have supposedly stolen the jade Buddha, when in fact it was actually a Chinese lady that took the Buddha and sold it on their behalf, just without anyone in the village's consent. And I think this could be a nuance that's purposely overlooked to try and create greater division in children's minds, and want to further British children from their roots, and instead slyly coerce them into siding with the Chinese, which are obviously the vampiric entities, the ethereal entities. That's what they're representing in this film. And then we see that Jackie Chan's managed to get them mixed up with a different branch of Chinese people. Not in the sense that he's looked at Alan Partridge and looked at a Chinese man and gone, who's who? Not like that. It's not that far-fetched. I mean, like, they've got him into an altercation with them. But if we take into consideration, right, that the same scorpion representing these new Chinese people was shown in the sky earlier, it could be that they represent our overlords. Again, the scorpions, the shape-shifting pigeons that move through the sky and look like scorpions in the clouds. It repeats. Maybe Jackie Chan is to somehow show that the overlords, or the species that are above us, just want to live alongside us, or at least some of them do. That the universal positron actually just enjoys experiencing itself, whereas you've then got this other group of the same genetic makeup who are, for some reason, at war. Maybe, right, as well, if we was to extrapolate from this and consider the idea of the shape-shifting overlords that keeps coming up, maybe there are distinct groups, or maybe just the one breakaway group that's trying to cause trouble. And then the Jesus Christ character amongst them, represented here by Jackie Chan, fights to keep the world or the universe itself in balance. And the hooded character, mate, the Obi-Wan Kenobi figure, he's back and he saves Jackie Chan, it looks like. And we see them vampiric teeth again on the face masks of what now get referred to as the 10 Tigers. But, right, there's the 10 Tigers here, plus Jackie, Alan and Mrs. Orange. So that makes 13. 13's another number that comes up a lot in these films when we watch these films. So that's JC and another, JC plus 12, mate, as well, which is pretty weird. That's, Jackie Chan, JC, Jesus Christ, plus 12. It's fucking bizarre, mate. It kind of also ties in with the idea of a vampiric entity looking over people for whatever reason, whether it's to farm them or control them or to just simply protect them like an endangered species. But then it turned out that Jackie Chan was just one of the 10. But that makes it even weirder because now that number 12's back and it's the repeating of a dozen or 12, which is months, or half the hours in a day, or a good amount of eggs. Do you know what I mean? It's always in everything, mate. 12 is everywhere. We also then get a bit about men dressing as women, and Alan seems to be saying that he will no longer dress as a woman again, and he says that as a way to try and upset the woman he's with, Mrs. Orange, but it does look as though he might, which seems to be something that a lot of younger people also kind of seem interested in now, and it's maybe because of little bits like this that were in films, little bits that are thrown in films, little throwaway lines and that help people realise that it was a possibility, and that's how some people thought and wanted to be. And obviously it's also helped with the acceptance of it, adding, slowly over time, adding more and more references to it in popular culture until eventually there's whole films and TV shows dedicated to it, at which point, though, those new TV shows and films will just have other throwaway lines in them that are, because now them TV shows are not a mainstream, so they've got the brainwashing things in them as well for the next things that are going to come along the pipeline, because obviously these films and TV shows now are nothing more than vehicles for propaganda and hidden messages themselves. And next we see a man travelling alone, which is something that's in a lot of stories. There's always this, and to reference Star Wars again, there were times in all 9 films of the trilogy that the main characters would voyage alone or walk through a desert or something. But also in the Bible, where Jesus goes and gets about for 40 days in the woods with that bloke who works at Esso Garage near his mum's house. Then you've also got Noah, if you remember last week, he were floating around for 40 days. So it's something that gets referenced a lot and brought into stories a lot, and in the film we still seem to be around that 40-day mark, so it all fits quite nicely. It's hard to tell what the message here is, but there must be a reason all of these things are repeated to us over generations, 40 days, 40, 12, there's got to be a reason, there must be. Somehow as well, the Great Wall of China manages to lead our characters to America, which could once again just be a subtle way to show us that there are structures connecting different parts of the world to one another, possibly even suggesting hidden links between China and America specifically. What's weirder is it seems that from China, they arrived in New York going off the voices and that, which I am struggling to grasp and get my head around, but there's also a lot of signs about gold, so there's a good chance they're also in the West, and I think they are actually in the West as the film went on. We hear a line here about how Alan's a devil worshipper and deserves to be cut up for it, and apart from feeling like this line genuinely encapsulated the American spirit, it also seems to be a good way to turn people against Satanism and Saturnalia, which is apparently very, very different to Satanism. It's the idea that the planet Saturn is the real or the second sun in our solar system, and the rich actually worship that planet instead. A belief that's become more and more widely discussed as well since the film's release in 2004. And immediately, right, after this remark, there's a panic about how the flying men are coming, which could be a nod towards Saturnalia again. Maybe, right, there are Saturnians on Earth, not as in, like, fucking goat creatures, but as in Martians, but from Saturn. This could also explain the association of the goat with Saturn, though, as well, a way to help disguise the fact that, Venetians are from Venus, Martians are from Mars, humans are from Earth, but Saturnians aren't actually from Saturn, they're mythological goat creatures. Now, there's another nod to perception filters here, because there's a quote from a man, about a man, should I say, that says, living what he dreams, which to me is suggesting to your children that reality isn't the same for everyone. We see a representation of light as well in this scene, which seems odd, and it's trying to consume the dark as well, which is another thing that's believed by many ufologists. Mrs. Orange and Jackie Chan are dressed in white at this point, whilst Alan's dressed in black, and he gets hugged, or should we say enveloped, by the white of their clothing. And I'm now wondering if all the French people that we saw as well, I think they must have all been famous French actors, because at this point in the film we're seeing a lot of famous American actors here, and there's a lot of big English names as well. So I'm presuming, and Jackie Chan's a big name, you know. Don't know if he's a big name in China. I'd imagine he is. I know he's a big name in America and all of, you know, the Western world. I don't know if he did films in China, but I'm guessing he must have done. But I don't know if the other Chinese actors are big names in China, and the French actors must be big French names as well, I would imagine. But I'm not too sure. I don't think I recognise Jean-Claude Van Damme in any of these scenes, so I'm not overly sure. I can't think of any more French actors, to be honest with you. But anyway, in this next scene where I realised, these are all big names, or biggish names, we see the Wright brothers, and one's dressed quite posh and the other's dressed down. So the poorer looking one has the idea for the plane, but the posh one talks down about it. And then when Alan says it's amazing, the posh one's on board with the plane idea and changes the narrative completely, like there and then in front of everyone, showing your children that posh people control the narrative of history, and it doesn't matter what's true and what's not true, because as long as posh people say something is something, then that means that something is something, and that means that something could be anything to anybody. And we're back again to positrons and electrons and ethereal entities, because now there are lights literally floating around the totem pole that we're seeing and around the train tracks. Maybe to place the foundations in your kids' heads for learning, or at least wondering about things like the Skinwalker Ranch. And we then see that there are corrupt, evil Irish police officers, and we see the Statue of Liberty, and all of these things then get associated with an evil Chinese warlord. Now that makes links between the Chinese, the Irish, the French and the Americans being in cahoots against the British. And I'm wondering if in each version of the film, if they do change the film around, are the characters swapped so that each child watching it has their own, you know, in their own country, feels like they're surrounded by enemies. Because that's what this is probably like for a kid, you know, that if they lived in Britain, in England, or out in Wales, Scotland, you know, Ireland, Northern Ireland, they're looking and they're seeing the Irish, the Americans across the water, the French. Everyone's against you in this film. Everyone's against the British, and I think it's just a way to maybe make your kid fearful of foreigners, so that newspapers can sell more newspapers when these kids grow up, kind of thing. Anyway, the evil Chinese lady has long, sharp nails, which she uses to attach into JC's neck and shoulders, right? And now that would be the perfect place to put puppet strings if you were making marionette dolls, which ties in with the puppet master idea and the ethereal entities controlling people and that. And we see something new here as well, and it's something I'd never considered before I'd seen this scene. But what if the Statue of Liberty is a prison, whatever description, you know? There's the possibility that the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty are the main emitters for the Gray's perception filters all around the Earth, but what if they're just a literal prison? They could easily conceal one of the immortals that we learnt about in last week's episodes, banging within the head of the Statue of Liberty, or behind a closed door in the Eiffel Tower that they won't let you in, because if you try to film behind that door, they'll have you for terrorism. They could do that and no one would ever know, me. Then the Statue of Liberty winks, mate, almost as if to go, "You're right, Jack, you're right." And so what if the statue, though, it could be the prisoner, but then it starts to all get weird again, the film, and it zooms out and to show the Earth and starts showing lights dancing around the Earth, tying in with my theory that the positrons, from the very start, and that's what the characters are, or electrons, and then this camera plummets into the oceans, maybe to show us that these creatures are also beneath the surface of the seas, which is something I've touched on before as well. We then see what seems to be the rich disposing of a person who failed their task as well. And could that be why celebrities get killed at a young age? Was Tupac actually supposed to recover an ancient artifact and failed and then got killed in Las Vegas because of it? There's some similarities to the story, if you tie it in with Around the World in 80 Days. Because in Vegas there's fucking loads of gambling, and this entire film's about a bet that's been placed. We then get a scene where a ship gets dismantled to make a prototype gliding plane. That's one creation becoming another coupled as well in this scene with Mrs. Orange and Alan Partridge sharing a kiss. Now, what's sharing a kiss? Sharing a kiss is just sharing DNA. And then what happens, mate? It fucking comes full circle. It fucking zooms in on the moon, mate. Which it fucking, how many times do I have to say and point it out? DNA sharing, DNA splicing, the fucking boat becomes a plane, these pairs start snogging, and then it zooms in on the moon. They're fucking making things shag or making new things using a transference of DNA inside the moon. Or the moon's being used to do that to us. I'm not too sure. We then have a scene where there's this thing flying around in the sky, and it starts as a rumour, and John Cleese's character says people will believe anything. Then the crowd starts chanting and points at it, and it's visible, and it still remains untrue that this thing is flying in the sky in the eyes of the police or the authorities of the film. And they speak about, when they start getting questioned about what's happened, right? Alan Partridge's character, Alan Partridge starts speaking about how he's seen new cultures and he's flown across oceans, and then he compares that to him wearing women's clothing, which, if you think about it realistically, the acceptance of people wearing different people's clothing and that all sort of blurring the lines between gender does seem to be quite significant for a lot of people all around the world, because it's a change in the shifting of way people think. Just in the same way that flying across an ocean, I guess, made people think differently. They would think, oh, you fucking hell, now I could send a photograph of my penis, and instead of it having to go by boat and getting there within 4 days, it could fucking... I could send it by plane and it gets there within a day, and then she sees it sooner or he sees it sooner. Just, I mean, you could look at this in the same way and think perverts would use this and be like, oh, brilliant, I can wear a dress and I can just go and I don't have to take a picture of my penis and send it anymore because I'm not allowed a phone since fucking that whole fucking debacle. But I can still wear a dress and stand on a car, on top of cars, or go up a bus alleyway, gangway, and fucking flash me knob at people. You know, so big societal shifts is what I'm saying. You can see how these things could change the world. It doesn't have to be about exposing yourself. I'm just trying to keep it so that we can understand what could be happening here. It's just a nice way, because it's become more accepted, and it's probably thanks to lines like this in films, it's made people's lives much easier and much more worth living. It also now has a subtle nod to a possible George Eastman, because, which we always look for, and it's always there, because they find out that they've actually been travelling for 79 days instead of 80, meaning that they've gotten there a day early. But because they kept changing how they measure time, they were able to move the goalposts, which could explain why we have 12 months in a year instead of the George Eastman, what he wanted, of 13, the guy from Kodak. Again, though, it could be that maybe the 12 months is relatively new, say in the past 50 years, maybe since World War II, who knows? Like when they added the fucking daylight saving times, maybe we added daylight saving times, which means code for we removed a month. Do you know what I mean? It could be a possibility, and it's all happened because of a wager like this between rich or powerful beings, meaning that could be why the number 12 is so important in storytelling and just keeps coming up again and again and again. And once again, it zooms out to show the Earth, and at the end, like this is the end now of the film, but it shows loads of lights surrounding the Earth, like atoms, like positrons, like electrons, and they seem to be really important and never get explained throughout the whole film, but they're there. They're evident in the credits too, and they're the only thing with the credits. And unsurprisingly, right, each one of those sparkling bit circles is made up of 12 separate sparkling lights. Now, I know I'm onto something, guys. I just don't know what it is. I can't quite work it out. And that's it. Thanks for listening. Later on today, we're going to have HDR, and Jim will mix it. And tomorrow, me and Jimmy Budd are back with Troof Seeking, which I now believe to be the new and extended, uncut Troof Seeking. So come and join us for that, or fucking see us in a bit, guys. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, man. I won't take up too much of the time because it's over, and hopefully you're listening to all of these one after the other, or on repeat, maybe the same episode on repeat. But fucking leave us a review if you can, mate. Fucking share it with a mate, send it to your nana. I don't mind where you send it to, but if you get more people listening to it, thank you. If you did enjoy it though, fucking join the Patreon, mate. www.patreon.com/worldaroundyou. There'll be a link in one of the links in the description, I would imagine, of the one you're listening to. You can join for £1, £5, and you get access to all the video versions of these. You'll end up about 4 or 5 episodes ahead as well through Patreon, and you get access to some of my books as well, and a little discount code for some of the canvases as well. But even if you don't join that, fucking thanks for listening to it, mate. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully, here's the next one.